Hello guys, so welcome back to another video. So in the previous video we learned how to create tables, and we created a table called countries, the fields ID, name, population, and area, and we imported it and created a table for it. So in this video I want us to learn how we can start adding rows to our table. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new folder called country for models, and then I'm going to add my model, because for defining types, and as you all know, Go is a strongly typed language. So I'll just say models, and I'm just going to say type country struct. Now in this struct we are going to contain, it's going to contain an ID, name, population, and area first. Then the ID is going to be an integer for simplicity, and then we have the name, which is going to be a string, and then we have the population, which is going to be an integer. Then finally we have the area, also going to be an integer. This has to be capital. Now after we've defined our struct, I'm going to come back to my utils, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to define a function that's going to insert one row in the table. Okay, I'm just going to say func, just going to insert, and then with the insert function we're going to need excuse me, we're going to need to call the database, of course, for helping in the execution of the query, and then we're also going to need our models. Okay, and we're going to return the ID of the last inserted row. So here I'm just going to define the DB. It's going to be SQLite. Okay, and then we're going to need the country, or for simplicity I can just call it C, and then we're going to call the models first for accessing the model that we've just created, and then finally in this case we're going to return the ID of the last inserted data, or we return the error for handling errors while inserting our data. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to define our query. Now in SQL, when we want to insert, as you can see, it's just pure English. In creating table, just create a table if not exist. The same thing to when you're inserting, just going to insert into the table name, and then you define the fields. Okay, so in this case I'm just going to say insert into, and our table is called countries, because as we defined it here, countries, and then we need name, population, and the area. Okay, after defining that, we're also going to get the values. Now we're getting the values from the inputs. Okay, we're going to use 1, 2, 3, okay. So what this does is it accesses this data. Okay, and then after doing that, you have to execute it. Now when you're executing such a query, you're going to get a result, and then from the result we can return the IDs. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say results error, or I can just call it error. Then I'm going to say db, we're going to execute that SQL query. Okay, and then since we are basically, let me give you a secret. When you're working with Go, when you see these pop-ups, they can tell you how the results, the outcome. Basically, this is the function, and this is the outcome. We have the result and the error. So that can really help you in defining these values on this left side. So Since we're going to accept some arguments, we're just going to get the c.name and then c.population, and finally c.area. For those wondering where I'm getting them from, it's basically I'm using this format. They have defined it here: name, population, and area. Okay, and then finally we can handle the error. Say if r is not equal to nil. Of course, I'm just going to print it to the terminal. Println r. But now, since in our case here, we can also do this. Since we are returning to, and just basically, we can just print it. Okay, then we can say return result dot last inserted. Okay, awesome. Now we can go back to our main function, and then we come down here. So after, I'm not going to touch this because we need it. After we have created the table successfully, want to know. So now we can begin inserting our data. So first thing, we need to define a country. Okay, I can just say maybe country. Okay, then I'm going to get the model dot country. Now in our country model, we need the ID, we need the name, we need the population, and we need the area. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define the three. I'll just say name, and maybe I can call Kenya. And then the next thing we did is population. Maybe I can say let's say 4 million. And then the area, just say maybe 7 million. Okay, then now we need to insert this data into the table. Okay, so we're going to say maybe country ID, because based on our function we said it's going to return result and an error. Okay, then we're going to say utils dot insert, then we define the DB and the country we're going to insert. Okay, and then we're going to say if was handling the error not equal to nil, and then I'm just going to print it r. We're going to return. Okay, and then after successfully doing that, we can just print country and the ID. Okay, then you can say fmt. This is where we're going to format literals, and then you can say maybe the country. Okay, string was inserted with ID. Then since it's an integer, and to do that, the ID, then we're going to get the country dot name, then country ID. Okay, it's going to return the ID, of course. Now let us try inserting this. Then once it has successfully run, we can see that the country Kenya was inserted with ID 1. Okay, with ID 2, because it's duplicated, of course. Now basically what has happened here is the first thing, we have defined our struct. Okay, we're using this struct to inserting our data. It has an ID, it has the name, it has the population, and finally it has the area. And then the next thing, we've defined a function called insert that accepts the database and the country model. And then after successful inserting, is going to return the ID of that inserted data, and then an error, which we use to handle the errors. Then of course we define our SQL. It's going to insert the data into this countries table, of course with the name, population, and the area, and then we're executing it. Then finally coming to the main function where we have already defined our database. Then we're creating a table. Then we're defining a new country. Okay, we're defining a new country. We're also inserting the country into the table. Okay, and then finally we're defining the ID, and it's returning true because we had already inserted. So if we delete this, then we run this again, you'll be able to get the ID of 1. So thank you guys, and see you in the next video.